Let's go ahead and turn to the next slide and talk about the Chardonnay.
Yeah, sounds good.
All right. So what we have here is our 2016 Chardonnay. 2016 is actually produced in concrete. This is one of the first years that we started using concrete fermentation. And if you've ever been to Napa Valley or ever been to wine country, I'm sure you've seen a stainless steel tank. They're big, they're shiny, they're great for fermentation. But what we wanted to do was do something a little bit more old school, or something that they do in Italy and France. We bought these big concrete fermenters. So they're about the size of a stainless steel tank, but they have a 1 foot wall of concrete all the way. They're literally all concrete. So what that is going to do, and why I like that, and I like fermenting the Chardonnay in there, is because it does a lower temperature, longer fermentation. What I feel extracts more out of the grape. And so you don't have to add oak to it to give it that structure. You're getting structure and tannin out of the skins. So this wine is fermented in the concrete, but then aged in neutral oak barrels. So a lot of people ask me, what is neutral oak? Neutral oak is oak barrels that we've used for only white wine that are at least 4 years old. So once I've used them in our Jack's program, Chardonnay, and they become 4 years old, they now can go down to the Y3 program. I can use those as long as I keep those wines full of wine, or gas them in that short time where we bottle and then put more wine in them. I can use the same barrels forever. They'll stay one size. They won't expand and swell because I've always got liquid in them. So we use the same barrels on these over and over and over. When you taste this wine, when it's fresh off the bottling line, it's going to taste high acid, crisp, clean, and fresh. As this wine ages, it's going to pick up a little more structure. It's going to get a little richer in style. I personally love tasting this wine as soon as it's bottled, and it tastes more like Chablis than anything else that I know in Napa Valley. As the wine ages, it starts to pick up that structure. You'll still get the same tropical notes, lemon, the pastry, the same flavor profile, but the structure will be bigger than it was at bottling. So what that does, when we make Sauvignon Blanc and Chardonnay for Y3, and we pick earlier than most people, we retain that high acidity. That means that this wine's going to age longer, or it can age longer for drinking. If you're picking it at a lower acidity, the wine is just going to taste flat once it's aging for a year or 2 years. We've been making this wine this way since 2012, and each year we used to get kind of that 88, 89 points, and now they pushed us into that 90, 91 points. And I think people's flavor profile, they're getting away from those bigger, richer Chardonnays for the most part, and they're looking for something that they can drink that's a little fresher, a little cleaner, a little brighter. So personally, this is, it's definitely a little more French in style. Something you can, like I said, drink with or without food.
Yeah. So Dan, I think that at least for me, this is, and working with, consumers on a regular basis, and people have their definitely, preferences when it comes to regions, particularly with Chardonnay. And for me, this really challenges a lot of maybe common consumer notions about what California Chardonnay is. Like, to me, this is extremely, like you said, high acid, Burgundian, almost to me in style. I was wondering if you could maybe discuss a little bit about how maybe Chardonnay has a whole lot of preconceived notions that go behind it, and maybe where certain areas have those kind of stereotypes, I guess, if you will.
Sure. In the 90s, everyone was making these bigger, richer styles, and it was more and more French oak and more malolactic fermentation. And everyone thought that bigger is better. And there's still some people making wines that way. In the middle of Napa Valley, north of Cardinero, it gets warmer and warmer and warmer all the way up to Calistoga, where you get the hottest days and the coldest nights, where we produce Cabernet. I don't understand why anybody would grow Chardonnay grapes anywhere north of Carneros, but that's just my opinion. There are wineries out there that do it, but they are going to produce that bigger, richer style because they're going to have higher sugars. And so that's the reason why we can keep our acids high and our sugars low, is we're in a much cooler region. And I mean, we're still in Napa Valley, but we're at the very southernmost point of Napa Valley. And when you're driving through from San Francisco, I drive through there every day, and it's just, you wouldn't even think you're in Napa Valley. You think you're on the coast because you have the fog come in and the cooling winds from the San Pablo Bay. And it's cool. It's much, much cooler. It's on a everyday basis. It's 10 to 20 degrees cooler than Napa Valley. And that adds up and adds up. And so we're able to keep our acidity in check and our sugar levels low. But there's no right or wrong answer. As far as what style you like, there will always be bigger, bolder Chardonnays out there. We do make a Chardonnay from the Russian River Valley, which is actually a little bit warmer than this site. We do full mallow on that. It's under the Jack's label. We just make 200 cases. And it's a little bigger in style, but it's still got mouth-watering, fresh acidity. But, that's what's great about wine. There's no right or wrong answer,
Yeah, just totally.
It's always going to be different style.
Yeah, totally just subjective taste preferences, and there's not like you said, right or wrong answer. And I think that we've also had a question that was sent to me privately about oak usage and sort of the types of flavors that oak will impart, particularly within Chardonnay. And this kind of gets a little bit back to the used barrel question, but I know in Burgundy as well as other areas of the world, you can have certain areas that will have more of that sort of oak influence. But what would your advice be to consumers with regard to finding Chardonnays that they might like in relation to oak?
Sure. I always tell people, even if you're not buying my Chardonnay, you can't find it, at least come away from this conversation and figure out what you do like. So you can ask that question when you're in a restaurant or a retailer, and you can say, well, I had this Chardonnay. You've probably never heard of it. They're small, but they make a concrete fermented or unoaked Chardonnay, and I really like it. Because it's much easier. Chardonnay is probably, in most stores, probably the biggest selection. So to kind of pinpoint it, you really can't pinpoint it by region. It's not like France. We don't have rules. The same people picking their grapes out of this vineyard down in Carneros are Dariouche and Newton. And Dariouche makes a wine that's 15% in alcohol. This is 13. They're going to be same vineyard, total opposite style. So even though it's the same vineyard, you can't just walk in and go, well, I like that vineyard. You really have to know what style to ask for. And so I would say my style is definitely a little more of an unoaked style. And, and you can kind of look at it. I think a lot of people that are doing the lower alcohol Chardonnays are all kind of following the same, not recipe, but kind of the same. They're looking for the same things. They're keeping acidity and oak balance and sugar levels. So they're going to tend to use less oak. So my wine is traditionally 13%, all the way up to kind of 13.9. And I think most people in that area are traditionally going to be, if they're in that $20 to $30 range, they're going to be 30% or less new French oak. And I always think if you're going to be 14.5 to 16% alcohol, there's probably going to be a little more oak on it. But I would just kind of figure out what you like as far as whether it's, the percentage of alcohol by going in on that and saying, hey, do you have anything in the 13 to 14% or 15%, or giving them a name of something he's had before, or giving him a style. And I think the styles that you'd be asking for would be, unoaked, stainless steel, or butterball. There's still the butterballs out there,
Yeah, kind of the ambient movie theater popcorn Chardonnays,
Yeah. Or you can go light, medium, or full-bodied Chardonnay. Mm-hmm. Ours traditionally is more of a light to medium. The full-bodied would be the ones that have a little more oak and a little bit more structure to it.
Yeah. So sort of last question on this topic, and this is coming from Chuck. do you have like kind of maybe some tasting advice for when consumers are looking at Chardonnays and what flavors that oak might impart, because that might help them sort of discern, all right, do I really like the unoaked lean crisp style, or do I like sort of the more round oaked Chardonnay, and what sort of actual flavors can oak instill within Chardonnay?
Sure. So because we use neutral oak, we kind of fall between the stainless steel and the full-bodied richness that oak can give you. Stainless steel will give you a very steely character that you'll taste on the sides of your mouth, and you'll be tasting nothing but fruit and acid. And that extra step that we do after our concrete fermentation is put it into the neutral oak barrels, and we age it for 9 to 10 months. What that does is it allows more oxygen to get to the wine. So if I had it all in one big tank, you only have a little cap at the very top that's going to allow oxygen in. But if I break it down into small 60-gallon barrels, you have that same little gap at the top of each of the barrels. So as that oxygen goes in there and the wine is evolving in the barrel, it's gonna cause the wine to really change and evolve and pick up a little bit more texture. The oak, on the other hand, is just neutral oak. So it's clean, fresh, bright. It's not going to embark any flavor profile into that wine at all if it's neutral, if it is true neutral. Now, if I decide to take a couple of barrels, and sometimes we'll do this where we'll take a couple of barrels and we'll ferment into a couple of new French oak, and we'll kind of, because it's going to be so little, just to make, at the very end and we're tasting, we may add just a touch to it just to give it a little lift or give it a little more complexity, but it would be very little. So if you can taste any oak on this at all, it may be just from that little adjustment that we make at the very final end. Because we don't want this to be steely. We don't want this to be just all fruit and acid. We still want complexity. We still want texture with the wine. We just don't want you. We want you to be able to taste the fruit and not just oak. So it's going to be much cleaner, much fresher, much brighter. But the neutral oak itself, whether it's French, American, whatever you're using, shouldn't matter, because they ideally shouldn't be adding any flavor profile. They should only be adding texture, and that's because the oxygen getting to the wine. Everything that you've used in those first 4 years that you had wine in it, in those barrels, it should have sucked all that flavor out of it.
Yeah.
You're really just using it for a holding vessel. I could leave it in big concrete tank for 9 months and probably get the same. I would get the same flavor profile. It wouldn't be as complex.
Yeah, and in new French oak or new American oak, you're going to get some cinnamon, some vanilla, nutmeg, baking spices, and I'm searching for it. And like you said, I mean, it's totally clean, it's totally neutral. I'm trying to get it, and it's just bright, crisp, really nice, minerality, if you will. Yeah, I think this is a great contrast to what some people might think of as their preconceived notions about California Chardonnay. So
we have people every day come into the tasting room, and we do a flight of wines, and it always includes Y3 Chardonnay. And we get a lot of people that say, "Oh, well, I don't like Chardonnay," and it's, can you have something else? I said, "Sure, but just try this." And every single day that we ask that question, people are like, "Oh my gosh, this is Chardonnay," and it's because either the Chardonnay that they were drinking was maybe a less expensive Chardonnay that was made in a huge tanks and making, like I said, hundreds of thousands of cases. It may taste chemical. It may, it's going to be full mallow, and it's going to have a lot of oak and butter to it. You're not really tasting the fruit. Or they're in Napa Valley and they're tasting some of the bigger style Chardonnays that do have the oak on it. This is definitely, it goes great with lighter fare like salads and smoked fish and a little more, like I like to drink this on a hot day. This is what I reach for.